Hello and welcome to Work Cookie, our weekly gathering of IOs, HRs, OCs, recruiters, and an actor or two as we try to make the world of work a little bit better. And one actor, at least, is back this week. And last week, Heather, you started to dive into AI and how it is changing not only the world of work, the world in general. It's fascinating. It's scary. I know I've talked to IT people who are like, when are you going to be using, AI? And they're like, never. So, but it is out there. So today we're going to take a look at workplace well-being amid all this AI integration. So
Uh,
am I wrong to be a little apprehensive and fearsome?
no, no, of course not. So, yes, AI in the workplace. Yes. I don't know about you. I don't know if am I frozen? Let me
You're
see.
not now.
Okay. Okay. So, we are, my workplace uses AI. I adjunct teach. One of my workplaces does not use it at all, but my other places do. And so, I mean, it really is like a matter of preference, but it is here to stay. Surprise. So, it's not something to be kind of freaked out about, but I will say the the well-being aspect I think is really important. And so what I will say is we do need to keep an open mind and understand that it is rapidly changing. So, what may work today is going to continually change tomorrow and the next day. And there are so many programs, and the accessibility of it is consistently changing as well. And so, being able to understand that, yes, it can help you with the optimization and productivity and the effectiveness of your workplace, there are some things like security and the ethics surrounding it. Because let's be honest, as a professor, if I'm having students just copy and paste something from AI, I don't want to read that. That's not cool. Please don't do that for me. I don't like that. But if it is helping you with productivity and if you're able to like reduce some of your cognitive load, that's awesome. I say go for that. If you're able to take some of the tasks off of your list, set up some automation, that is super cool. If you discover some tools and things that help you in your day to day tasks, I love it. And let's be honest, there's so many things that are being developed over and over. I mean, there's way too many that I can even count. I'm always hearing about new things. And so I will say, I'm going to put the link here in the chat. I have a link and I also have a reference. I'll put both. Here's the reference for those in the chat, and then here's going to be a PDF link. Oh, too long. Let me go back. This is a link to a research article. Hi, LindaAnn. I love that you're on. So here is a link to an article on AI and employee well-being in the workplace. And what's super interesting about this, because one, this is our topic for the week, there really wasn't a direct impact on employee well-being, but there was an indirect influence with things like task optimization, workplace safety, and cybersecurity with the 207 organizations that they looked through in their research. And so some of the downsides of AI in the workplace, especially lately, because give like 10 years ago, we didn't really have all of this AI integration. But nowadays, it's like AI's everywhere. Just like turn around, any workplace, we have AI everywhere. So some people are fearing like their jobs are going to be taken away. I don't know about you, but I don't have that fear because I asked AI to do something and I asked it for like a 4-letter acronym that started with an A because I was looking for a specific assessment, but I just couldn't remember exactly what it was. But I knew it started with an A, and it said, "Oh, I know what it is." And it gave me the acronym STOP. That starts with an S, and it had nothing to do with the assessment at all. So I have no problem with AI at this point because that was absolutely not what I was looking for. Some other downsides were they were afraid that ethics, like when is this being used? Is it being used accurately? Are we just copying and pasting it? Can we be certain that these statistics are correct? Because where are these coming from? How do we know that these are real? Do you remember like in math when you're in school and you had to show your work? Like,
Yeah.
yes, you could use your calculator, but you still had to show your work. Do we need to go back and start doing that? Even if you're using AI, can you show your work where this came from? Because I feel like we need to start doing that again. If it's going to get to the point where we're giving results, this might be what we need to do.
Hey, AI, where did you find all that? And do a
Yeah.
biography then. Um, I'm sitting here and I'm going, boy, I've heard that AI is improving so rapidly that within a year or two, I'm going to have a new best friend. And they're going to help me with my work and make me much more efficient and productive. And then 2 years after that, I'm going to be replaced by that AI because it now knows everything I know. So I'm hearing 50% of the office staff is going to be replaced by AI. I mean, we think about the factory and we're making widgets and we can just build robots to build widgets. We may need a few people to maintain the robots. But I'm also hearing now that it's the office, which is the next area that they're targeting. So are you hearing the same thing or is that just fear?
So, okay, my initial
Because they ain't helping my well-being.
so I shouldn't laugh, but my initial thought when you were saying that was, have you seen that article? And there was a video that went with it. I'm sorry if you're hearing the text message that's coming through on my laptop too, but um, there was this article of this robot. It was an AI robot. It was programmed to do um, just essentially some busy work. And it was doing the same thing over and over and over, kind of like an assembly line. And it was just monotonous. And it became so bored. And it just essentially like deactivated itself.
Robot suicide.
And so at this point, like, no, I'm not super fearful of that. But also, AI, there was like a comment. It said it feels like maybe using AI citations and references might be called for. Casey, yes, one, I do agree with that. Absolutely. Um, but no, I don't feel. I don't know if where you live, Tom, in Canada, do you have at your at your fast food places like the at McDonald's or other places like the virtual kiosks to order food?
Yes, I think our McDonald's here do have them. And, I don't usually go to McDonald's much, but when I do, nobody's using them.
Yeah, no, well, they don't work.
Well, yeah.
Um, they don't work. So like even if we were to have that and like there's this cute little restaurant near us and it has like little ramen. Like you can order ramen and then the robot kind of just like rolls away from you with your ramen like it's supposed to come to you but it's just like bye. Like I guess if you could grab it fast enough you could you could get it. And so maybe one day so no, I think right now we have a little bit more work to do before 50% of our employees would be laid off. And by a little, maybe a lot more work to do. So no, I think the human element's still going to be there. I think that's a lot of fear mongering. at this point. But if Nick, you have some alternative facts that you want to share with the class?
I don't know if they're alternative facts, but just kind of looking at the landscape, the people who are wanting to hype up AI as the next big wave, their line is always, this is the worst version we're ever going to see. It's only going to get better from here. So there is some exponential growth. It's going to happen quickly. It's already trying to jump on a moving train to figure out how to use it. What as far as trying to frame it in the space of employee well-being, there's a couple different things. Nobody thought the PC was bad in and of itself. And then, secretaries years later had carpal tunnel. So there's all sorts of potential unintended consequences that we'll see with this. We're already seeing it with the smartphone. The barroom trivia game isn't as much fun as it used to be because you have the internet in your pocket. You can just go check the facts. Do we have the patience and the wherewithal to really think through, okay, this no-hitter was thrown in what era? Oh, it was when I was a kid. So we're looking in, the early 90s or whatever, and walking through it. I've seen people take that deliberate step to say, no phones, we're going to talk this out, we're going to spend 10 minutes, and then we'll check the answer. And I think that that's kind of that next step will be, okay, I'm going to try and think through it myself, and then I'm going to bounce it off of AI, or I'm going to have AI do something, so I'm just not staring at a blank page, and then I'm going to write the next great American novel. So I think there's a lot of cooperation with it, and I think organizations have kind of an inflection point here. This is a big, fast-moving technology, and if you're looking to improve your bottom line and hack people out of the office, it's a little heartless, but be clear about what your goal is. Or we're going to say, what, as an organization, we're saving money by using these tools. So we're, keeping people on to be that bespoke customer service that for people who don't want to talk to a robot, we're offering more because AI is taking care of, 70% of it. We're hiring for that 30%. And we really are committed to people to train to do this. And right now, I think one of the other problems with AI is we're trying to use the new tool to solve old problems. And it's beyond that. Like there's a transformative nature of it. We're looking at, okay, is education just supposed to be fact recall or is it critical thinking? And how do we change that system moving forward? So I think there's a transformative power, but we're not necessarily asking the right questions. I think a lot of it is, well, how do I make my day-to-day better with this tool when there's, jobs that haven't been created and all those sorts of buzz questions. But I think organizations do have a responsibility to some degree to stop and think, how do we want to use this? And I think we will see, as we throw AI up against, problems, we're like, I can do this faster myself. I don't need to prompt the thing 8 times. I can just do a quick internet search. And so, will organizations say, we're deliberately not going to use this? We're taking a stand. We're making a policy. We do all this because we care about the mission of the organization and the people. And so I think there's that human context of, okay, we've upped our productivity. Is that so we can be even more productive? Or that's so, hey, we've upped our productivity. We're going to a 4-day work week. Where are the goals? Where are the places where you can use it not only to improve the organization, but the individuals sort of thing. And right now, I think, Tom, you're right. There's a lot of fear and uncertainty because, again, this is moving fast. And in the absence of a story, we make up our own. And so I think, my job's going to be gone in 2 years. Your brain's wired to find a problem, and you've found a problem, and you can sit up and worry about it at night.
Well, I hope, part of that discussion, if you're going to bring AI in is, we're going to be more effective, we're going to be more efficient, we're going to be more profitable, and we're going to raise your salary. Because, that might be a bonus because salaries need to go up. But let me ask you, because are we going to eventually be into those discussions of, well, what is human? I've got an AI assistant who is just like a human. I mean, they talk to me. They've got a voice, and they're nice. They're nice to me. Why can't they?
Well, it's fascinating because you look at sort of the parallels between cognitive ability of a human and what the large language models are doing. They're really just bumping up against something, and if it works, they go with it, which is how we learn as humans. So there is a lot of parallels. There's a lot of things, but again, we tell a story on their behalf. You're projecting how you feel about that AI assistant, because they're giving you the answers that you want. They're efficient, they're kind, they're kind, they're professional in their language, that all this sorts of things, that it's a program. And it's hard to remember that at times because it has mimicked the way that you think and behave so well. I mean, I don't think we're going down the road of Blade Runner by any stretch of the imagination, but I think there will be sort of that. And, I wish Dr. Emmy was here because we talk about, your AI team member. Like, how do you treat that component of the business? Because it's here, it's happening. But it's, is it abusive to say, oh, I'm just going to work this AI until it can't work anymore? Well, it doesn't have feelings. It can keep going. And that's the appeal to organizations, that they don't burn out, and they require maintenance as far as making sure they're doing what they're supposed to and staying with the bounds of their programming. But if you have a power source, it'll go as long as you need it to. And I think that, there's an emotional toll there as far as worker well-being. Like, am I talking to a person or am I talking to an AI? How do I set those boundaries and those understandings? And I would say that it's also new that we can't see the long-term effects of what's happening. But some of the early returns on putting too much emotional weight on an AI aren't real good, like we talked about last week.
Until we wake up one day and we're in the Matrix. Thank you very much for that. LindaAnn, over to you. I hope you have a leather coat ready.
So there's a couple points. One is, not only do you need to have it provide the references, you need to go check those references. Often the link is broken, and often it's not the right information. So you need to be discerning in that process. You can't just ask for references and say, oh, it checked that, so it's good, because it's not. And I argue with it often on that level. What the other thing happens is, and I use primarily ChatGPT, but when I've asked it to do a complex task, like I want to do iterations and I want it to get better, and I've got it giving me links to other things and all that, it's been somehow programmed to make assumptions and make decisions on your behalf on what you want. And as it goes down that rabbit hole, its results become less and less and less accurate, valuable, and those kinds of things. So it doesn't have the same reasoning power at all. And I think that the other thing too is AI is used kind of like for everything. It's kind of like the term Kleenex for tissues, right? And a lot of what people are calling AI is really just high-level automation. It's not really AI. And so I think what's important to think about it there, do that discerning factor. Is this really just a high-level automation, or is this really something that's spending time reasoning? And when you look at job descriptions and so forth, part of that qualification for whether or not you're an exempt employee or not is, do you have to do specific reasoning to do your job, right? I think we also need to look at it as where we are in the typical product life cycle. And you have where you initiate into the market, and then it grows and develops and becomes mature, and then it declines, right? So if you look at other things, for example, I remember when answering machines first came out, right? And everybody was going to an answering machine. And I said to my staff, I said, someday what's going to happen is the real market niche is going to be we answer our phones. And that's the truth, right? People use that as a real benefit now. Like, you get a human answering your phone. And so it's part of a product life cycle. Like, you don't have answering machines because things have kind of evolved away from that. Right. So I think that some of the fear that people have about things taking over their job or whatever is only because they don't know what the next evolution of what they do looks like. Right. They don't know how to open that door in the next level, and you and I have seen this process enough to know that there's always something else that it evolves to. Like, and last week I used the example, I don't know, a year and a half ago, the biggest thing was prompt engineer. Right. and people were being paid a ton of money. That's gone already,
Wow.
right? So because you can say to ChatGPT, I want to do X, Y, and Z. Give me the prompt for that and ask me any additional questions you need to be able to give me this. And it'll do that. And so you don't need to pay somebody to do that. It does that for you too.
Let me ask you if, because we're very early into this. If you could design and teach AI to help you with your work, what would it be doing?
It does the busy work for me, right? If I need to come up with I don't know, like a training tool, it can give me the outline and give me depth and stuff that I wouldn't think of, right? Because it's checking all these different aspects. And then I want the links and stuff, but I go ahead and I check the links and I make sure that the content's been verified by people and all those kinds of things. And then I use it to make something better.
Would you ever, let's say, you're booked one day for a conference and then you get this emergency phone call and another conference wants you for the same day, but this one's online. Could you develop, and even would you even develop an AI that was so good we couldn't tell the difference between you and the AI version? Would you use that to speak for you?
No, I just asked for a different time slot.
Yeah, there's always a simple answer. All right.
No, I could do the remote at one time slot and do the real thing at the other times.
Thank you very much, Lee. Let's go over to you.
Hello, Tom.
Hello,
Greetings
Lee.
from partly sunny Birmingham, Alabama. Yeah. Well, the one thing I would say to you, Tom, is how do you know we're not already in the Matrix?
Good point.
Would we know?
No.
Because until Neo showed up, they didn't know. Now, the thing we have to remember is that AI is a tool. It's not the answer. It's part of the way to get to the answer sometimes, but it is not the answer itself. And you got to use the right tool for the job. And you're not going to try to put in a screw with a hammer, or at least you shouldn't. Might be kind of entertaining to watch you try it, but excuse me as my GPS tells me to take an exit. But, I've been at a conference this week and I'm on my way home finally. So yeah, this goes back to what one of our adages we always use in the military: trust but verify. To LindaAnn's point, you have to check any reference that it gives you, because it hallucinates. It makes stuff up. It looks great. They can give it to you in the format of whatever you're using. If you're using APA, it could be perfect. And then if you start to read what it actually says, it says something really stupid. Like, Joe, comma John. It's in some journal that kind of sounds like it'd be kind of cool if it existed. But you have to check those things, and you have to make sure the links are right. And the thing is that we call it AI, but they're not. They're large language models. They've been trained on a large amount of information, and it makes its predicted text. Essentially, it's kind of like what you do on your cell phone when you start typing something and it pops up options for work. That's what AI is doing. ChatGPT is using the algorithm to say, I think Tom's wanting this. And, and like LindaAnn said, it starts going down a rabbit hole, and it really starts making assumptions where you end up having to redo prompts like explicitly during your search, because otherwise it starts just making it up on its own. It's crazy, but it's a powerful tool, and I mean I use it regularly, but it is a tool, and once you start relying on it, and that is a definite warning to students. That's what I tell my students: don't ever turn in something ChatGPT gave you. Just don't do it. Do the work yourself. If you want help, great. You need a new word? Awesome. You want to know how to do a transition from one paragraph to another, sweet. But do your own work, because otherwise you're spending all this money for education you didn't get. We might as well put ChatGPT's name on the diploma because you didn't earn it. And then when you come in and try to get a job from me and I start asking you questions, you go, you can't have ChatGPT answer for you in the job interview. At least not yet. When we have the LindaAnn version of ChatGPT, maybe. But for now, there are some things that we still have to do ourselves.
Yeah, well, today, but maybe tomorrow. Thank you very much for that, Lee. Drive safe out there. Rich, I saw you put some links up in the chat. You want to tell us a little bit about those?
Sure. Yep. I just, one of the things that my students need to work on is putting some of those citations into their papers, so a couple of things I wanted to share was like the APA. One of the links that I put in here, some of the ways that they're using AI for machine learning, that's like deep learning and using data and processing data, right? Then there's a generative AI part, which is the natural language processing, or NLP. And then there's robotics. Then there's the using this as human robot interaction, and even some of the autonomous robots that Dr. Heather says can zip past you when you're trying to get your ramen, right? But the thing is, you have to be intentional about what you are using this for, right? I'm a SHRM, not only certified professional, but also a mental health ally. So there's some things that SHRM put out, and one of them is in a recent podcast, Marjorie Morrison, who's the executive of residence for mental health for SHRM, said that we have to be really intentional about using AI to support and not replace the human relationship, right? Because that, we're dealing with people, and frankly, the robots aren't the ones who are necessarily paying us either, and they're not buying the products and making the purchasing decisions. And the whole reason why a company exists is because there's a customer, right? So omitting the customer is as a human. I think also there's something to be said for having people make decisions about people and who we're serving, right? So that's something else that I wanted to bring into that. Another thing I put in, because there's a lot of discussion about the ethics of using AI, right? So SHRM actually has a pretty good resource that I shared on like when should AI lead and when should humans make the decisions. And I have a friend, Erica Holthausen. Hi, Erica, if you're listening. But she helps people to write for high visibility publications, and she says that she is a self-professed curmudgeon against AI, specifically when it comes to your own decision making and creativity. She's like, number one, commandment is thou shalt not outsource your own thoughts and creativity to artificial intelligence, because we have to ultimately be looking through we can use it to process data, but we have to be the ones to look through the different lenses of the human experience to get to what makes sense. And I think the last thing I wanted to mention, I know I'm throwing a whole lot of stuff, and hopefully I'm connecting dots here, but the other thing is earlier it was discussed about like students, right? Lee was just talking about this just a second ago. And there was a Time article that I shared that says, students are there to form neural connections, right? New neural connections, process information, and it's supposed to stick in their heads. But when you are trying to access information that is in your head and you outsourced it to the machine, how are you gonna have that recall, right? So our memory of facts, the ability to be resilient, all that's going to weaken, according to Dr. Khan, who's in that article that I put there. So
Well, let me ask you this though, because as we've talked, AI is really in the early stages, but it's developing, it's getting better. But I'm hearing, and it's only really limited by the computing ability. But I'm hearing within 5 to 10 years, quantum computing is going to be here. And when we combine that with AI, it's a totally different ballgame. Because the computing power is going to increase so much more. So are we going to be having this conversation again in 5 years when that's added to the picture?
Well, I mean, look, artificial intelligence has been around for a lot longer than the last 3 years that, we're all talking about ChatGPT. I remember going to a Salesforce convention, it's a Dreamforce, here in Chicago, and they released Einstein, that's like the artificial intelligence layer for Salesforce. That was 2016, so we've been talking about AI for a long time. It's just now we're talking about, again, looking at those different types of artificial intelligence. We're talking about that natural language processing, right?
Right.
And the generative AI part of it. But I like what futurist Michio Kaku. I may have mentioned him before on here, right? So he's a quantum physicist and a futurist, and he's written some pretty interesting books, and he's there and has some nice, interesting videos, and he talks about quantum computing, but he's like, there are some things that you just, what I really like and have some hope for is that he says that the capital of the future is intellectual capital. It's the capital that is created by humans. It's our ability to be creative. It's the arts. It's it's our ability to be able to create and make new things. Where, yes, can we use artificial intelligence to create a new layout or draw a picture or create a piece of music or stuff like that? Yes, but there's this human aspect that is going to be needed, to make it fit the requirements of the people who are buying, if that makes any sense. The perceived value. I kind of think about this like the perceived value of art. Think about that. Like if you were buying a piece of art, would you pay top dollar for a hand painted masterpiece by somebody, or something that arguably looks more realistic or whatever, but it was manufactured by a computer? I would venture to say that commoditized computer drawing has far less value than what came from the master artist's hand.
There we go. Thank you very much for that, Nick. Back to you.
Yeah, again, I think people get swept up with, the science fiction idea of, AI and tend to give it more credit than is due. I mean, economically, these AI companies aren't turning a profit yet. There's more going in than is coming out. And we're very much in the stage of throw AI up against anything, and where it sticks, that's where we're going. Again, I think that's still part of the model of trying to solve current or old problems with new technology, instead of saying, where does this get us? What does this free us up to do? I think one thing for me, I know when I see something written in AI, or I hear those AI generated podcasts, I cringe a little bit. Like it's off, and it's very much like in music when you're trying to tune two instruments together. When they're way out of tune, it's awful and nobody cares. But the closer you get, and when it's just a little off, like the dissonance will drive you crazy. And I think that's where I am with a lot of that sort of stuff. And talking to Rich's point about expertise, these large language models can take the APA guide and say, okay, here's formatting and here's the rules, and the rules are the rules. And they're logic machines, and they're really good at saying, this is the rule, don't break the rule. But as we know, real genius comes from, how do I break the rules? How do I exploit the rules to create something great with a creative endeavor or even a business endeavor? And I think it is that arms race. Everybody's trying to be out on the front line and find that next great idea. The next great idea might be, you know what? It's more important for me to show up as a person and build a community and speak authentically. And I'm going to use my voice, because if everybody else is using AI, I sound different. I sound unique because I have chosen to, sharpen my writing in a different direction. So I think that there's going to be that pushback. The example that jumps to me is the automated checkout. Somebody was mentioning the McDonald's kiosks, the self checkout at Target or your grocery store. I don't like use them. I didn't clock in. I'm not here for that. And usually I've got my hands full with kids. So I love having another person be there to help. If I'm just grabbing one thing, sure, fine, that's whatever. But I think you see that sort of, oh, it's so great, I can take this. Oh, now we have to deal with loss and security and things like that. And then people kind of push back and go the other way. So I think we'll see a lot of this push-pull as we go through. Of course, tomorrow somebody could have a breakthrough and say, oh, I've solved nuclear fission, and now we're going to have power, to power the computing systems. And what are the societal and global impacts of things that we just don't have the capacity to think about, these large problems that if they're running in the background of a server, that all of a sudden the math makes sense and somebody interprets it and is able to put it into play. So I'm hoping, and I'll be the starry-eyed optimist again, that good will lead to good will lead to good. But I think right now everybody is seeing that as, okay, this is really cool. This might be a quick way to make a buck, and I don't have to do anything. But I think part of learning is the process. And so I think that as we, deal in education, okay, yeah, I know you can go to ChatGPT and do this, but, here's how you identify a source. Here's how you do this. And hopefully you get to a point where it's, okay, I've gone through the process. I know the value of what this is saving me, because I've gone through and I've been in the trenches. I've shown my work. I've drawn out the long division and things like that. And so it just, there's hope that, if we use it the right way, whatever that might be, if we keep people at the center of it and, try and stop and think about, well, why am I using AI for this? Is this the right tool for the job? And so again, I'll let others, hopefully, either go positive or negative, but that's just kind of my 2 cents right now.
Well, it reminds me of when I started my master's program. One of the first things they explained to us was, in your undergrad, you learned the rules of art, but that's not art. Art happens when you break the rules. You just have to know how to break those rules. So I'm going to stick with that. Thank you very much. Laura, over to you.
Yes, and kind of playing on that, I joked that maybe it's not breaking them as much as bending them like a pretzel. Like, I used to work with someone, and he was a former Marine who turned into a counselor therapist, and so he would say, "Semper Gumby, stay flexible." And that was one of my favorite phrases that I've stolen from him. But I thought it was interesting to kind of hear there's some element of like, not like contention, but like hesitation, I think, in our conversation so far about being mindful how you're using AI and what are the uses, and employees are concerned about losing their jobs, which is very fair, I think. But what I find really interesting is kind of tying it into that like well-being amid AI.
Yeah.
Is, if for those that saw with my camera off, I work for a tech company who is very hands-on and involved in the AI race right now. And one of the things I really appreciate that they just highlighted in a recent summit they had about healthcare and having AI involved in it is the focus is AI is to remove the challenges that are so frustrating so that we can return to the human element. And there's some really great stories, and I'm not in marketing or sales. I'm not trying to sell my company and their product necessarily. But when I watch it and see those stories, I think it's really helpful. I also support employees who are working alongside the physicians and nurses. And so it makes it much more real because I'm hearing like my colleagues are hearing it in real time. And that to me is the benefit. And that's where we're pulling it into our organization of where can we remove the challenges so they can work better and they can focus on the human element. For me specifically, I forget, someone referenced another individual as being like an avid anti-AI user. And like in my personal life, I am the same way. I don't use any of it in my personal life. I refuse. I don't know. I'm very uncomfortable with it. However, again, I work for a tech company who uses it. And that is what we're selling right now. So I use it, but very specifically only on my work laptop, only for work purposes. With a lot of the organizational changes that we have had recently, I've moved from being a part of a team to a part of a much smaller team to now I am the single person fulfilling employee learning support in an organization of over 1,000 employees with a lot of different backgrounds and things. And so for me, this dialogue is some of my best learning and development of content, is having conversations like this and joining these kinds of interactions. I don't have those colleagues anymore to have these conversations with unless I look into other orgs and other lines of business and things like that within the company, which I can do and I have been doing, but I'm finding I can go to AI and it helps prompt my creativity, right? So LindaAnn talked about like prompt engineering. I watched a class hosted on O'Reilly about work and AI and prompting, and listened to it and applied it. And now that I'm prompting it much better because I had no personal life experience, so I didn't know what I was doing. Now that I've had that, I'm prompting it much better, and it's giving me that spark of creativity for when I need to develop something. Like I'm building an outline, I'm trying to figure out how do I tackle this tough topic. It gives me a starting place, but all of the guidance we give is whatever your output is from the tool, you better look at it before it goes anywhere. You better review what it's having. And I think as long as from an ethical standpoint, that is emphasized early and often, I think that alleviates a lot of those issues. But people aren't doing it, and people did it a lot, I think, in their personal lives and didn't have that common practice. So
Right.
That was a very long response. Sorry.
No, that's all right, because as a wellness side of it, I've worked for an organization and talked to other organizations who they're not even going down the AI path. They're like, we don't know enough about it. We're afraid it's going to, all of our intellectual property will disappear on us. And it's put me into a place where, well, maybe I should be a little cautious with it. I mean, I've never even really experimented with it because, everything could go wrong. So, to ease my tension about using AI, what could you share with me that's going to make me go, "Oh, okay, I'll give it a try."
I, for one, appreciate I want to understand it, right? I'm not a tech person, though I work in a tech world. So having access to the learning resources to just explain what is AI, what is generative AI. One of my more recent ones explained about what is an AI agent and how is agentic AI different than generative AI. I did not realize that was not the same thing until I watched the course. So I think learning and understanding those elements of what makes it AI, so then you can be a smarter user, because then you'll start to notice when I had this just recently, and it was a nightmare of an AI experience, but I went to call and make a doctor's appointment, and it was the AI bot that I had to work with. And so you'll start to be able to understand when you're interacting with it, what are you getting? If you're getting a generative AI, are you getting a chat bot? Is it agentic without generative? That to me is where I always go, because I'm a learning nerd, right? I think these kinds of conversations are important. How are other people using it? What are they running into? Like the prompt questions, like the reviewing it and then following the links that it's providing, right? And seeing where it's getting the information. Learning how to do your homework and how other people are figuring out how to do their homework to backtrack it.
And
I don't know if that was helpful or not, Tom.
Very helpful, because I think we're all talking about AI, but how many of us really understand what it is? And because, I learn a lot from being here, like the large, learning models. Most people don't hear about that. And so, we keep talking about it. We hear positive things, we hear negative things, but I don't really know what it is. So I think, just more understanding would help a lot. Thank you very much. LindaAnn, back to you. I can't hear anything you're saying, LindaAnn.
So I think we're in a really unique position, right? Because we have a foot in both worlds. We remember what life was like before computers and Google and all those kinds of things, and even some of the iterations for younger folks. But when you think about children that were born, in the past couple of years, they're going to be AI natives. They're digital natives, and so they think about things differently, and they don't know any other way. So the way that they embrace it is different, right? And the way that they learn it is different. Think about this. There are some kids that will, have never read a magazine. And, or they won't take notes by hand because they've never had to do that. Everything they use their iPad in class or whatever it is, and it's in a database and you can go check it. You don't have to take the notes and on and on. So there's that. So we're our perspective and our fears are unique to us because we're straddling the situation. Now, the other thing that happens though is then they go to, again, it's a product lifecycle process. They go through this process, and then because we're human, we want to come back. The pendulum swings back on some level, right? And so we get to this balance, right? And you've seen it, whether it might have been with airlines, it could have been with computer manufacturers. There's always this process of all this buildup, this shakeout, and then we calm down, right? And so I think it's important to put, that lens or perspective on things. The other part of it, though, like even Walmart has taken out some of its self-checkouts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they want to go, well, first, there was a lot of theft. And second, they wanted to improve the experience. And so, again, you're already seeing, this is a very, very quick cycle, right? But you're already seeing the reversion back to something more human. And the other difference is the difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? Mm-hmm. Knowledge is information and facts and all those kinds of things. And AI can give you that, but it can't give you wisdom. It can't give you that experience, understanding, and reasoning on how to apply it when. It's so fun. My daughter's 28, and recently she was recounting something, and she says, "Yeah, I've seen that here, and it was in this situation, and you don't want to do that because of X." And I said, "That's wisdom." I said, and I said, "And what? I have that too."
I'm sitting there going, I don't think I've had that experience with my daughters. Thank you very much for that. Cam, let's go over to you.
Tom, it'll come. Yeah. Kids eventually come back around. But Laura mentioned using AI to sketch out some L&D initiatives. One of the things that I did right when I was getting ready to graduate was I wanted to take everything I learned in 4 years of PhD studies and teach it in a community center. Because I thought, okay, let's make better managers locally. Well, but I had no idea how to organize it. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, I want to do this course and I just listed everything I wanted to include, and it ordered it in a way that I didn't even really realize how well it had done until I got about halfway through the course, because it started with leaders having self-awareness and the importance of psychological safety, which if I had not, I would have normally started with belonging, which was my area. But if I had not started with those two things, I would have missed out, because in nearly every lesson throughout the course, and it was a 8 session course, we referenced psychological safety and self-awareness. And so I didn't have that insight that even ChatGPT, even a couple of years ago, had. And speaking of belonging, I think that, and LindaAnn referenced this too, we're going to have, as we have more and more use of AI, and hopefully as we have more and more use of remote workers for our planet, but that's another topic. I think we're going to have more loneliness on the job, and I think the number of people that I've been in a virtual space with who have said something scary along the lines of, well, it almost feels like a friend.
Yep.
And I think mental health mental health of workers wise, we're going to have a crisis eventually, where people are using this as a substitute for human contact, much like binging Friends on a streaming service feels like you've got 4 friends. Or scrolling Facebook feels like you're connected to those people. It's an illusion. And that's one of my concerns with worker safety. Is AI going to be the next worker best friend?
Well, that, it's part of my concern too, is, and not just AI, but technology in general, is we throw it out there so quickly and we have no idea if it's going to be a benefit or a harm. And then we look at the issues and go, maybe we should have thought of that before we put it out. But we're not. We're just throwing stuff out there, and then we're being reactive. We're trying to deal with the issues it's creating. Are we? It's probably impossible to slow this down, but do we need to spend more time with asking those questions? Like you took it and you developed it and learned it, but I don't see anybody else out there telling us actually how to use AI to benefit ourselves. Is that the book that someone on this panel needs to write? Because I'm looking at you, Cam.
Well, unlike Laura, I use AI extensively in personal life. So we discuss nutrition, we discuss diet, we discuss what the doctor said about whatever. And so those things are very helpful.
There you go.
In addition to skilling up at work, it also taught me R.
Yeah, I could use a good teacher. Thank you very much. Nick, back to you.
Yeah, I think that there's something to be said. I think Laura was kind of talking about, it's still a computer system. So what you put in is greatly going to influence what you get out. I know that I have, in my use of AI, I have to stop and think, what is it that I really want to get out of this? What am I trying to get to? Because if I say, oh, do the thing, I'm expecting it to be a mind reader. And, so I have to kind of hold its hand and walk it through each and every step. And it's frustrating, but at the same time, it does kind of teach a level of clarity. And can we take those human communication skills, and now you have a rec room to practice them without hurting anybody's feelings. Again, that adds to the risk of personifying AI to the point where it can give you bad advice and you might trust it. But, you could give me a bad stock tip and we would have to adjust that relationship as well. So it's not a problem that's necessarily unique to AI, but, it is the communication, the understanding, the critical thinking, and all these things that go into it. How do we use the tool? How do we understand it? But we have to use those same tools in the discussions we have here. Is Nick just, pulling a rabbit out of his hat with what he's saying? Most of the time, yes. But, where is the research? Where's what's going on? And so I think that there is, going to be that greater emphasis on the human skills, I don't want to call them soft skills, but the communication, the understanding, persuasion, and all of that. Again, if everybody's communicating in the same way and you sound different, that's a really good way to get noticed. And it's a moving target. And to bring back some of the worker well-being, this is going way faster than our biology and psychology is, evolving. And, in those evolutions, it's not always what's best, it's what's optimal, it's what works. And so when we see all these things get thrown up against the wall, it may not be the most optimal. It may not be the best thing for, humanity. It may be the thing that makes a buck and gets off and running, and we don't go back and visit the things that failed when there's new capabilities behind it. So there's that. And I think, community and connection are always going to be there. I've met half of these people, in real life, but the relationship started through a screen. It can still be done. It just takes longer because you're missing out on some of those other cues of body language, true vocal tone, things like that. And we have to kind of hold some of those things in our memory, saying, okay, this is a great tool, but it's not necessarily what our mind or body needs.
Absolutely true. LindaAnn, over to you.
So I'm going to use this as an example. There was in I guess in the 80s or 90s, early 90s, there was a Star Trek called Star Trek Next Generation. And one of the characters there was a functioning android, complete robotic quote person, right? And what I loved about that particular series is that it was based in very solid science. All the things that they did was based in very, very solid science. And but the frustration that the android itself had was it knew it didn't have emotion, that it didn't have that element to it. And it was frustrating for him, that was his persona. And so I think it's really important for us to look at that and go, oh, he acted, he knew how to perform in certain ways and those kinds of things, but he could never, ever get there on some level.
Didn't he eventually get married? Did David get married at one point?
I don't know.
Because that's going to happen with robots and AIs, and
Oh, well, that happens already. People literally fall in love with their car, with radios. I mean, I've seen that as a kind of a mental, there's a diagnosis for that actually. But yeah, that already happens way before the GP launched GPT. I think if you watch the show, My Strange Addiction, they have examples of that on there.
Wow, I have to tune into that. And Heather, I'm not sure if I might be replaced by an AI next week, just to improve my wellness. Cam, let's go to you.
Yeah, the Orville on Hulu is a science fiction. It's very Star Trek-y feeling, but it's not that universe. And there was an AI being, and unfortunately, the plot line led to him happily marrying the ship doctor. But one of the plot lines was that this being had no emotions, and that was one of the struggles in the relationship.
Well, we could look at another sci-fi series with Vulcans, and they didn't have any emotions either. So there you go. And I know lots of people on this planet who don't have any emotions. So there you go. All right, Heather, really fascinating chatting once again. I'm not sure if we've come to any resolutions, but to boldly go and see what happens.
Right. Yes, I agree. I think it's important that if we are going to try to support employee well-being, we should at least train them on the use of AI, be ethical, and try to at least use it in a way that is supporting good employee behavior and using it logically in the workplace.
I totally agree. And thank you very much for all the work you've done this month, leading these sessions.
Yeah.
What's happening next week? Do you have a preview for us? Do you know what's up?
Yeah, so I know it is Dr. Emmy. I don't know the topics, though. I think I'm frozen.
I think we're going to be talking about transforming leadership development. And I believe we're actually going to have a special guest next week, and that's Gaynell Vanderslice. So, creator of the honeycomb leadership model, which I have no idea what that is. So, I'm going to be here to learn next week. Maybe some of you have heard about it and can come with some great questions as well. So, Heather, anything else to add?
No, not for me. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. So thank you once again. And thank everyone for your contribution today and for tuning in. And we hope you're enjoying the podcast when you listen to those as well. And so, Heather, if you want to count us out, we'll see everyone back here in 1 week's time.
Of course. Thank you, everyone. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.